Let's move further. Whereas continuous variation among the people prevent drawing of clear dividing lines between the groups. So what they are talking about, there are continuous variations among the people, prevent drawing line of clear dividing lines between the groups. Those militating for the recognition of their group identity arbitrarily chose a limited number of criteria such as religion, skin, language, and the place of origin, so that their members recognize themselves primarily in terms of the labels attached to the group whose existence is being asserted. Now, in short, what these three lines are saying, they are not dividing lines on the basis of language they speak, the religion they follow, the skin color they have, but majorly they are labeling it. Not on the basis of that, they are labeling it basically in the terms of whose existence is being asserted. हम अपने जो existence की बात कर रहे हैं उसके ऊपर ही label कर रहे हैं, not on the basis of these things. This distinction between the group in question and other groups is established by simplifying the feature selected. अब वो क्या बोल रहा है, अब इन ग्रुप्स को आप आइडेंटिफाई कर सकते हो जो कि शायद रिलीजन्स, लैंग्वेज, स्किन कलर के लिए हैं, और दूसरे ग्रुप शायद जो अपनी रूट्स को पहचान रहे हैं और अपने एग्जिस्टेंस के बारे में बातें कर रहे हैं. These distinction between the simplification also works by transforming group into essences, abstraction endowed with the capacity to remain unchanged through time. So simplification is also on the basis of these two things. In some cases, people actually act as though the group has remained unchanged and talk, for example, about the history of nation and communities. And then there are some groups, they are talking about 2-3 kinds of group here. First, we are talking about this. I am just marking that in green color so that you guys can understand. First group, they are talking about this. The second group, they are talking about this. The third group, they are talking about this. And the fourth, they are talking about this. So these are the kind of groups they are talking about. Paradoxically, which means oppositely, the way we are talking about, paradoxically, there is a situation which you need to say, precisely because identity represents a simplifying fiction, creating uniform groups out of disparate people, that identify performs a cognitive function, right? वो क्या बोलना चाह रहा है? Paradoxically, ये सारी चीजें simplification के लिए ठीक है, but paradoxically and precisely, मतलब accurately, because identity represent a simplifying fiction. जो identity है, ये एक fiction represent करती है, and what is that? Creating uniform groups of disparate people. That is where a paradoxical thing to say कि अलग-अलग लोग का एक uniform group ये create कर रही है, and it enables us to put names to ourselves and the others from some idea of who we are and who others are, and ascertain the place we occupy along with others in the world and society. And because of these disparate people groups, and we are able to put name on ourselves and on others. Again, the cultural thing they are talking about. The current upsurge, अब वो current upsurge की बात कर रहा है, to assert the identity of groups can be explained by the very important thing, cognitive function performed by identity. Identity is performing that cognitive function. However, that said, people would not go along as they do, often in large number, with the proposition put to them, in spite of the sacrifice they entail. ये लोग जितने भी ग्रुप बना लें, ये अलग-अलग ग्रुप, जितने भी यूनिफॉर्म, ये अलग-अलग जो लोग हैं, जितने भी यूनिफॉर्म ग्रुप बना लें, कुछ भी लेबल कर लें, बट ये एक साथ नहीं चल सकते, चाहे ये कितना भी सैक्रिफाइस दिखा लें. They can't move in large numbers with the proposition put to them, in spite of the sacrifices they entail, if there was not a very strong feel of the need for identity. In सबका common चीज क्या है? Need for identity, right? A need to take stock of the things, who we are, where we come from, and where we are going. ये तीन चीजों के बेस पे ये ग्रुप साथ में नहीं चल सकते, and that's what they are doing. So this is what the whole idea was all about. I'll just quickly move to the previous slide. The problem, globalization, why the upsurge? Upsurge was basically positive and negative. Positive because we are talking about liberation movements, negative because we are talking about isolating. We moved on that how these groups are created, and these groups perform a cognitive function of what? A very important thing which I am again highlighting here, which will give you the main idea, the thing of identity, the cognitive function of identity, who we are, where we are coming from, and where we are going. This is what the passage is talking about. Let's move to the questions. According to the author, happiness of individuals was expected to be guaranteed in the name of. The first paragraph, the nation state, which was supposed to give the happiness of individuals, they are not able to do that. How they have to give the happiness of individuals? By giving a nation state thing, and that nation state ideology, which was once accepted by all because of those three reasons. What are those three reasons? Now this was very good question. One has to go to the passage and mark the answer. अगर आप बिना passage के जाएंगे तो आप गलत कर लेंगे, because a fact based question था, right? Let's see. Development in the third word. So this is the exact line which was given. Here we go. The development in the third word. एक बार वापस लाइन पढ़ लो, मैं आपको ऑप्शन बता दूंगा. In the name of ideologies, वेस्ट का मॉडर्नाइजेशन, ईस्ट का सोशियोलॉजी, डेवलपमेंट थर्ड वर्ल्ड का था, राइट? एंड लेट्स मूव टू द क्वेश्चन नाउ. व्हाट दे वर सेइंग, development of the third world, that was okay, that's what my answer is. Second, socialism in the third world. देखो इस तरीके से वो कंफ्यूज करेगा पेपर सेटर. It was not socialism, it was socialism in the eastern bloc. It was socialism in the eastern bloc. Developmental in the west, yes, we are talking about development in the west. Is it? No, we are talking about modernization in the west. We are talking about modernization in the west. Modernization in the eastern bloc? No, it was socialism in the eastern bloc, and that's why option 1 is the right answer. A fact-based question. If you are marking this question, and that too in the first paragraph itself, if you are getting negative marks here, if you are marking it incorrectly, you guys are doing a blunder. इसको गलत करना एक दंडनीय अपराध है, right? Let's move to the next question. Demand of the recognition of identities can be viewed. Recognition of identities. So we were talking about demands for recognition of identities. That's what we were talking about. Let's see. Positively and negatively. Yes, they talked about positive aspects to this and negative aspects to this. As liberation movements and militant actions, yes. Positives, we are talking about liberation movement. Negatively, we are talking about militant actions. Third, as efforts to rediscover roots which can slide towards intolerance of others. Yes, we are talking about identity, and that's why the answer should be 4. Very easy. No need to go to the passage. No need, absolutely no need to go to the passage. हालांकि okay, the first question was fact based. इसको भी मैं बोलूंगा, it was again a fact based question. It was again a fact based question, right? Let's move to the next. Going by the author exposition of the nature of identity, which of the following, guys, ये बहुत importantly ध्यान रखना, not, untrue, ये सारी चीजें, right? Which of, going by the exposition of nature of identity, which of the following statement is untrue? मतलब false. Identity represent creating uniform groups out of disparate people. हमने last के अंदर देखा था. So this is a true statement. This is a true statement. Can't be my answer. Can't be my answer. Second, identity is a necessity in the changing world. Okay, let's see. Untrue की बात कर रहे हैं. Identity is necessity in the changing world. Identity is a cognitive necessity or none of the above. So identity is a necessity in the changing world. That is something my answer is, because changing world में identity एक necessity बन जाएगी. That I can't infer. That is untrue. Identity is a cognitive necessity. Yes, it is a cognitive necessity which is given. None of the above होगा नहीं, इसलिए answer should be second. Clear everyone? I hope it is. Let's move to the next. According to the author, the nation state. So देखो यहाँ पर कितना important role play करेगा आपका passage का समझना. Author is negative towards nation state. Author is negative towards nation state. Yes, the whole passage is about negative. He is talking negative about the nation state. First, has fulfilled its potential. Positive. Is willing to do anything to preserve order. They are even going to the extent of genocide. ठीक है? Third, generate security. Positive. So author is negative. This is a positive statement. This is a positive statement. Has been a major force in preventing civil and international wars. Again, a positive statement. The only negative statement is second. Here we go. We have the answer. As easy as that. समझो कॉन्टेक्स्ट को और आंसर निकालो, बिल्कुल आएगा, कुछ डिफिकल्ट नहीं है. The last is which of the following views of the nation state cannot be attributed to the author. मतलब अगेन वही क्वेश्चन है, उसी तरीके का क्वेश्चन है. Which of the following views of nation state cannot be attributed to the author. मतलब यहां पर तुम्हें वो ऑप्शन मार्क करना है जो कि पॉजिटिव होगा, बिकॉज author is negative towards nation state, cannot be attributed. मतलब you have to talk about the positive option. Let's see. It has not guaranteed peace and security. Negative. It's negative, so can't be my answer. It may go as far as genocide for self-preservation. Negative. Can't be my answer. It represents the demand of the communities within it. Positive. Positive. It is unable to prevent international wars. Again negative. Can't be my answer. Answer is option number 3. As easy as that. Understand the question properly. Because मैं इसीलिए बोलता हूं, जो मैंने पहली क्लास के अंदर भी बोला था, that हम लोग पता नहीं क्यों इतनी स्पीड के अंदर जाते हैं and we tend to forget all those things. It's easy. It's easy, and don't say that, sir, ये तो आप करा रहे हैं, CAT के अंदर नहीं आएगा. You can expect these questions in CAT. You can expect these passages in CAT. ऐसा नहीं है कि ये नहीं आएगा. That's exactly the same level, and probably this is one of the passages which I have taken from CAT past year paper. Right? So this is something which you need to understand. Right? So next is economics and history. The third passage is on economics and history, and your time starts now. Right, so quickly I'll just take you through the slides. So this is basically in 3 slides, right? These are basically in 3 slides, and as I said, just to make you comfortable, these are slightly longer passages as compared to what you can expect in CAT. For this, let's take again 10 minutes and solve. I repeat, 10 minutes, keep the pointer and just read the passage, and then we will start, and your time starts now. Okay, I'm sure you must have read the passage by now, and specifically those who are not very much into the trade or things. देखो, मैं हमेशा बोलता हूँ, when we started off with the first passage, we talked about what was the passage? I think economics. We were talking about economics there, and there would be some students who would not be comfortable with those topics. For me, it might be easy passage, but for some of you, those might be jargons because you have not even heard about this before. Similarly, I mean, these are basic general knowledge thing, and that's why I always say that you guys should read a lot, right? So this WTO, this GATT, what exactly this is, what is this Uruguay round, क्या होता है इनके अंदर, when we talk about all this trade, import, export gain क्या है, import gain क्या है, all those things you guys need to understand. Specifically students who are not from commerce background, they tend to find, you know, difficulty in reading this passage. हालांकि ये passage बहुत easy था, right? The World Trade Organization, WTO. So my first suggestion to you guys is, because we don't have time and we are not getting into this at this point of time, but in a later on stages you will probably get some of the knowledge sessions also. At this point of time, my request to you guys is read about WTO, read about WTO, European Union, Uruguay round. ये सारी चीजें आपको पता होनी चाहिए. The World Trade Organization, WTO, has created in early 1990s as a component of Uruguay round negotiation. So it was created in 1990. However, it could have been negotiated as part of the Tokyo round. So ये सारे discussions होते हैं जब member countries के, तब इनको round बोला जाता है जहां पर ये बैठक होती है. So it was supposed to be done in 1970, but it was there in 1990. Since that negotiation was an attempt at constitutional reform of the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, that's GATT. What they are saying is ये 1970 के अंदर हो जाना चाहिए था, because it was, since that negotiation was an attempt of a constitutional reform of the General Management Tariff and Trade Act, or it could have been put off to the future, या तो वो हो जाना चाहिए था या उसको फ्यूचर के लिए रखना चाहिए था, as the US government wanted, जैसा कि US government चाहती थी कि उसको फ्यूचर के लिए रख सकते थे. What factors led to the creation of WTO? What were those factors which led to the creation of WTO in 1990? That's what you will get in the passages to come. Let's understand what are those things. Okay. The one factor, so they are first talking about the first factor. They're talking about first factor here. The one of those factor was the pattern of multilateral bargaining that developed late in the Uruguay round. So the first was the multilateral bargaining. It started very late in Uruguay round. So that was the first case why WTO came into picture, about the multilateral bargaining, right? Like all complex international agreement, WTO was product of a series of trade-off between the principal actor and the groups. So there is a principal actor जो सबको पूरा लेके चलता है, and then there is a group around them. इन दोनों के बीच में और यहाँ पर भी complex international agreements थे. For the United States, now they specifically mentioned United States, which did not want a new organization. So they are saying United States did not want a new organization. The dispute settlement part of the WTO package achieved its long-standing goal of a more effective and more legal dispute system. So what they are saying is, US, जो कि ऊपर लिखा हुआ था, they don't want any new thing to come up, any new institution to come up, or it could have been put off to the future as the US government would wanted. So they were not looking forward to the new kind of agreement. But in WTO, that's what they get. They get that it is a very good organization for the dispute settlement, and that was what attracted US to sign that okay, WTO should come, because it was longing for the long-standing goal of more effective and legal dispute US. For the Europeans, so why US agreed to this? Let me go back to what they are saying. Why US agreed to this? Because of the reason they want a dispute system to be there. For the Europeans who by the 1990s come to view dispute settlement less in political terms, more as a regime of legal obligation. So they were very glad that it is more of a legal obligation rather than political. So they're very happy to see that. That's why Europeans agreed to this. The WTO package was acceptable as a means to discipline the resort to the unilateral measures by the United States. So what European was talking about is जिस तरीके से United States जो है वो dispute settle करता है, it will be a kind of a discipline to all those things, and that's what they mentioned in the starting. One factor was a pattern of the multilateral bargain. So everyone was talking about a multilateral bargaining. पहले जो सिर्फ US करता था, that was the discussion all about. Countries like Canada and other middle and smaller trading partners were attracted by the expansion of rules-based system and by the symbolic view of trade organization, both of which inherently support the weak against the strong. And when there were smaller countries like Canada and other such countries, they were very happy because it was this WTO was pro towards weak rather than strong nations, which is not the case earlier. So why WTO came into picture? Because the first reason they talked about a multilateral bargaining. Multilateral bargaining के बेस पे सारी चीजें हुई. Why US agreed for WTO? Because of the dispute settlement. Why Europeans agreed? Because ये US के unilateral चीज को खत्म कर देगा, or it is a kind of a discipline. Why Canada agreed and other small nations? Because it will give strength to those weak countries. Okay, you should understand this, right? The developing countries were attracted due to the provisions banning unilateral measures. And again, जितनी भी डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज थी वो भी यूरोप की तरह यूनिलेटरल मेजर्स जो यूएस करता था उसको कंट्रोल करने में जो डब्ल्यूटीओ सहायक था, ही वाज सपोर्टिंग दैट. ये सब देख के अदर कंट्रीज हैव आल्सो एग्रीड. फाइनली and perhaps most important, so these are some of the reasons, but the most important of them is many countries at the Uruguay round came to put a higher priority on export gains. Here we go. The first, अभी तक हम लोग जो बात करते हुए आ रहे हैं, we were talking about the unilateral bargaining. Now we are talking about the very important thing is the higher priority is export gains. This, my dear students, is one of the factor which is very important for you guys to understand. Then on the import losses that the negotiation would produce, and they came to associate with the WTO a rule-based system with those gains. So we are talking about the unilateral thing, and then we are talking about the export gains. And when I'm talking about the export gains, we are talking about the developing countries. So they were very attracted because of these, not developing, I would say many countries. Yeah. This reasoning replicated in many countries was contained in US. Ambassador Cantor defense of the WTO, and it amounted to a recognition that international trade and its benefit cannot be enjoyed unless nation accept the discipline of a negotiated rules-based environment, and he was what defended the WTO for that. So very important thing that we are talking about multilateral bargaining, right? That was one of the reasons why WTO came into the picture. Why United States agreed, European states agreed, other countries attracted, all those things were given here. Very good. Now let's move to continue to the next slide. The next slide was talking about a second factor in the creation of the WTO. So the first factor was, sir, बहुत बार बोल दिया, yes. The first factor was multilateral thing, and in that highest priority was given to export gains. That's what the first thing is. Okay. Second factor is the creation of WTO was pressure from lawyers. That's the point number 2. The pressure from lawyers. Let's see why. The pressure of lawyers and the legal process. The dispute settlement system of the WTO was seen as victory of legalists over pragmatists, but the matter went deeper than that. So legalists मतलब they are talking about lawyers, pragmatists मतलब जो पुराने चीजों को चलाते आ रहे थे या फिर not पुरानी चीजों को जो एकदम dictate करते हुए आ रहे थे. The GATT and the WTO are contract organization based on rules, and it is inevitable that an organization created to further rules will in turn be influenced by the legal process. So it is all about rules. Robert Hudek has written of the momentum of the legal development, but what is this precisely? He's written momentum. Legal development का momentum हुआ है. What is this? Let's see. The legal development can be defined as promotion of the technical legal values of consistency. So the legal values are kind of promoted, clarified, effectiveness was there. These are the values that are responsible for administrating any legal system. Will seeks to maximize. As it played out in the WTO, consistency mean integrating under one roof the whole of the separate agreements signed under GATT. So what was it here? The consistency here was कि ये सारे agreement जो GATT के अंदर थे उन सबको integrate कर दिया गया. Clarity means removing ambiguities about the powers of the contracting parties to make certain decisions. So it is all about rule, it's not about power. And effectiveness means, so ये सबका explanation दे रहा है. So let's see ये क्या कर रहा है. अगर आप देखेंगे इसने explanation क्या क्या दिया है. So we were talking about consistency. Consistency की हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं integrating के अंदर. Clarity, which means it is all about rules. Here it was about integration. And now what is effectiveness? Let us understand. Effectiveness means eliminating exceptions arising out of the grandfather rights. So there is no exception कि इसका right ऐसा होगा. Grandfather right जो होता है inherited rights, and resolving defects in dispute settlement procedure and institutional provision. So it is all about effective system, effective legal dispute mechanism. Concern for these values is inherent in any rule-based system of cooperation, since without these values, rules would be meaningless in the first place. So rules therefore to create their own incentive for the fulfillment. The momentum of the legal development has occurred in other institutes beside the GATT, most notably in the European Union. Now they are saying that not only in GATT, जहां से हम लोग WTO लेके आ रहे हैं, it also was there in European Union. Over the past 2 decades, the European Court of Justice has consistently rendered decisions that have expanded incrementally the European Union internal market, in which the doctrine of mutual recognition handed down in the case Cassis Dijon in 1979 was the key turning point. So now again they are talking about a mutual recognition. They are again talking about a mutual recognition. The court now widely recognized as a major player in the European integration. It is not about any country in the European Union. It is the court which will decide. It is the court, it is not Britain, it is the court which will decide, even though arguably such strong was not originally envisaged in the Treaty of Rome. Earlier in the Treaty of Rome, ये कहीं पर भी दिख नहीं रहा था. No one kind of predicted, right? But this is what happened. The court was the sole major player which initiated the current European Union. One means the court used to expand integration was the teleological method of interpretation. So how they expanded the integration was a teleological method whereby the action of the member state were evaluated against the accomplishment of the most elementary community goals set forth in the preamble to the Rome Treaty. So it was all about the accomplishment of the elementary community goals which was mentioned there. This method represents an effort to keep current policy consistent with the stated goals and is analogous to the effort in this. In both the cases, legal concern and procedures are an independent force. So they are talking about the procedures, they are talking about the rules, they are talking about the legalities, they are talking about rule. This is what they are mentioning. In large part, the WTO was an exercise in consolidation. Author is concluding here, in large part, it was kind of a consolidation in which WTO is getting into in the context of a trade negotiation that created a near revolutionary expansion of international trade rules. The formation of WTO was deeply a conservative act needed to ensure that benefits of the new rule would not be lost. ये नए rule जो बनाए गए हैं वो कहीं खत्म ना हो जाए. This is what was taken care of. The WTO was all about institutional structure. They were all about institutional structure and dispute settlement. These are the concerns of conservative and not revolutionaries, which is why lawyers and legalities took the lead on these issues. That's why they were happy. The WTO codified the GATT institutional practice that had developed by custom over 3 decades and all those things. Both the international structure and the dispute settlement system were necessary to preserve and enhance the integrity of the multi-trade regime had been built incrementally from the 1940s to 1990s. So the whole passage was talking about why WTO came into picture, why. And then the whole passage kind of mentioned in the reason why. Then the example was given, it was a kind of an example for European Union also, where all these things come into picture. And the last author is concluding that what WTO has done so far. Right? Let's now move to the questions. Yes, sir, we should. It was a very lengthy passage. And believe me now, without going to the passage, we have to mark the answer. Please note it properly. Without going to the passage, we have to mark the answer. What could be the closest reason? What could be the closest reason why the WTO was not formed in 1970? 1970, the Uruguay round. क्यों नहीं बना था वहां पर WTO? I mean the Tokyo. क्यों नहीं बना था WTO? Let's see. The US government did not like it. US government did not like the WTO. No. US government, तो WTO ठीक था ना, legal dispute system हो रहा था. तो US government did not like it. ऐसा हो नहीं सकता. Important players did not find it in their best interest to do so. So between first and two, oh yeah, by the way, the US said this after going through a trade-off negotiation that now the legal dispute system which WTO is getting into. Now we are agreeing to do that. So initially at the first place, they were kind of wanted to be on hold, as we have seen in the first paragraph. They don't want this to go further. Then the US government did not like it. First can be plausible answer. First can be possible answer for that also. Second, important players did not find in their best interest to do so. Let's see option number 3. Lawyers did not work for the dispute settlement system. Now this I cannot infer from first para, or let's say from the complete passage. I can't infer that lawyers did not work at that point of time. I can very well infer that lawyers were the ones who taken the lead to ensure that WTO come into picture. That's the second reason we talked about. But in the earlier case, whether they were working effectively or not, I don't know. So that's why definitely third I cannot infer. Let's go to option number 4. The Tokyo round negotiation was an attempt at constitution reform. Tokyo round negotiation जो था वो attempt था एक constitution reform के लिए. Okay, so why it was not formed? Let's go to the constitutional reform wala factor. So here we go. However, it could have been negotiation, since that negotiation was an attempt at a constitutional reform. Now we are talking about the closest reason why. Now if you go through the passage, अगर आप पूरे passage के अंदर जाएंगे, they talked about developing countries. They have given the reason. They have given the reason why WTO came afterwards. Why WTO was not formed at that point of time. The reason which they gave was this, that developing countries agreed to that export wala thing. US agreed to the dispute settlement system. European Union agreed to the rules, and then there were countries like Canada, etc. They was dependent on something else, and because of this, WTO was agreed upon. It was a complex system, as it was there in any other treaties, any other agreements, and this was the reason. If someone could have, someone could be confused between two options, it ideally should have been first and second. The confusion is to be between first and second, because this is something which is exactly opposite. They are talking about the first wala thing, the Tokyo wala thing, कि किस तरीके से हुआ. The lawyers वाला यहाँ मुझे पता नहीं था. Between this, first did not like it. US government did not like it. US government did not like it. से कहने का मतलब ये था, there are many places. It's not only about US government. It's not only about US government. It's all about other players, because WTO के अंदर it's not about US government has to say. It's all also about others as well, and that's why option 2 was the right answer. It was a good one, to be very honest with you, and the second option is the right answer. Let's move to the next. The most likely reason for the acceptance of the WTO package by the nations. सबसे ज़्यादा reason क्यों WTO package accept किया? It had the means to prevent the US from taking unilateral measures. This is one of the reasons. Yes. They recognize the need for a rule-based environment to protect the benefit of increased trade. That is one of the reasons. It settled disputes more legally and more effectively. Okay. And its rule-based system lead to the export gains. Okay. Fine. Okay. So let's see what exactly is the answer to that and why. Very important, guys. You need to understand the reason why. Okay. First thing, the most likely reason for the acceptance of WTO package by the nations. European Union was the only one. European Union was the only one in whose context we mentioned US. Let's go back. Need to understand the logic. For European Union, who by 1990s, it was more about the discipline to resort to the unilateral measures by the United States. Countries like Canada, they were talking about the weak versus strong. Strong ke andar many other countries can also come. for developing countries were attracted due to the provisions banning of unilateral measures, I can't presume that it is only because of US. And that's the reason, my dear students, the answer would for sure won't be 1. I hope it is clear. The European Union is talking about US. Smaller countries was talking about the unilateral measures from the powerful ones. The powerful ones can be other as well. It's not only US, and that's why this option is very narrow. So I'm eliminating option number 1. Okay, let's go to option number 2. They recognized, they as in the nations, they recognize the need for a rule-based environment to protect the benefit of increased trade. They talked about rule-based environment. Because यूरोपियन यूनियन ने क्या बोला था, एक एक करके बताऊंगा. यूरोपियन यूनियन ने भी यही बोला था कि सेटलमेंट डिस्प्यूट्स, उसके बाद कनाडा लाइक कंट्रीज ने भी यही बोला था कि हम लोग ट्रेड की वजह से, या डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज ने भी यही बोला था. इट कैन बी वन ऑफ द रीजन. It settles dispute more legally and more effectively. Let's go back to the passage where it was written. Let's see where it is given. Here we go. Can I make out from this that it is more legally and more effectively? Can we infer from this particular paragraph? Let's see. So we can't mention, but student का एक क्वेश्चन आता है कि सर कैसी बातें कर रहे हो, ये लिखा हुआ तो है, but guys, this line is only written for United States. This line is only written in the context of why United States agreed, not about other nations. And that's why, my dear students, we will not go with option number 3 as well, because we are talking only about US. We are talking only about US, a narrow option, and we have eliminated option number 1 as well as narrow option. Let's go about 3. Its rule-based system lead to export gains? No. It's not the rule-based system which is leading to export gains. That is one of the reason. Not the only reason, not necessarily this is the reason. It is one of the reason, or it can be one of the reason. And that's why, because the point is, अगर मेरे पास export करने के लिए कुछ है ही नहीं, just because you have rule-based system, it doesn't necessarily mean that export gain will be there. And this is not true for all the countries, because for US it was not the thing. For European Union it was not the thing. And that's why we are talking about increased trade, and that's why option number 2 is the right answer. I hope it is clear. Go back to the passage, logic को समझो. अगर तुम्हें दिक्कत आ रहा है तो वापस तुम comment section के अंदर get in touch with me or in the Telegram group. I'll be happy to solve all your doubts. Let's go to question number 3. According to the passage, WTO promoted the technical legal values through. WTO ने technical legal values को किस तरीके से fulfill किया? And your answer is, it was very clearly given, fact-based question, option number 1. It was fact-based question, clearly was given by integrated. तुम्हें अगर ध्यान हो, उन्होंने बोला था by promoting by through, जहां उसने effectiveness की बात करी थी, जहां पर उनसे consistency की बात करी थी, and that's where your answer is. And if I talk about the next, in the method of interpretation of the European Court of Justice, right? They talked about the European Court of Justice. They also kind of took an example of WTO. Let's go to the option 1. Current policies needed to be consistent with the stated goals. Contracting party trade practice need to be consistent with the stated goals. Let's go to the passage, because you need to understand that. Here we go. It is analogous to the effort in the GATT to keep contracting party trade practices consistent with the stated rules. Guys, retention. मैंने पहले भी पैसेज के अंदर बोला है, in my earlier videos also, retention is something which is very, very important. You need to think that yes, I have read it somewhere, but the point is, why deliberately I have not kept the passages in this particular video along with the questions. हालांकि आपको CAT के अंदर मिलेगा, you can just scroll up and down, but that again will tend to lose a lot of time. But yes, for the question like this, you have to go to the passage, and that's why I've kind of kept this passage separately. No, don't want to keep the question as I was doing in the earlier videos, so that let me see that you guys can retain or not, right? Okay, so that's why option number first for this question, which is directly given in the passage. Let's go to question number 5th. In the statement, it amounted to a recognition that international trade and its benefit cannot be enjoyed unless trading nation accept the discipline of a negotiated rules-based environment. It refers to what? Ambassador counter defense of WTO. Okay, it won't come there. Okay, defense की बात हो रही है, sorry. The higher priority on export gains placed by many countries. Okay, the export gains many countries come to associate with the rule-based system. The export gains many countries came to associate with the rule-based system. It amounted to the recognition and what they were talking about. So they said until and unless अगर आप ये नहीं बनाएंगे तब तक ये जो भी चीजों की आप बात कर रहे हैं ये यूजफुल नहीं होगा. Again a fact-based question, right? And let's move to the last. The importance of Cassis de Dijon is that where it is given, I'm just giving you 2 minutes to quickly go back and refer to where it is given. Let's see. I'm sure you can see that here. Doctrine of mutual recognition handed down in the case in 1979 was a key turning point. Here we go. Your answer is again the fact-based question, guys. Again the fact-based question. The answer to this is, let's see if it is given there. Yes, it is given key turning point in the European integration. So let me go to the questions quickly. Let me go to the questions again. Again, when we are talking about this, a fact-based question. Second, fact-based question. Third, fact-based question. Fourth, fact-based question. Fifth, fact-based question, and sixth also is a fact-based question. So all the questions in this particular passage were fact-based. So don't worry, as I said, घबराने की जरूरत नहीं है पैसेज की लेंथ को देख के या पैसेज को देख के. The things eventually will settle down. So with this, we are coming to the end of this session. Thanks a lot for patiently listening to this video. I know this video is slightly longer, but I'm sure these questions will definitely help you out. And in between, अगर आपको लग रहा है कि मुझे ब्रेक लेने की जरूरत है, take a break after let's say 1 passage or 2 passage and then start fresh if you are not able to sit for let's say 3 passages continuously, right? Thanks and keep watching e-coaching videos.